Hello, and thanks for joining the Lupus LA Your Story, Our Fight podcast. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz, and first I want to thank our sponsors, GSK. Today we're interviewing Emily Suñez. Emily, you're a artist, you're an advocate, you're an author of a new book, which we're going to talk about, but that's not where your story begins, and certainly not your lupus story. I think what's really interesting about your story is how you were on a path and lupus really totally shifted your path. And we're going to talk about that. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Adam. I'm so honored to be here today.
I should also say that what I like about getting to talk to you and getting to meet you is that unbeknownst to me, you were a longtime supporter and user of Lupus LA. And I think that's, it makes me really happy to hear when people have benefited from the work that Lupus LA is doing. And, you know, I don't always get to meet all the people that Lupus LA touches. And I think, you know, this is a special interview for me in that sense. And we can talk about that too. Not to tell you that you have to plug Lupus LA, but, you know, I think
absolutely.
It's an important part of your story.
I'd love to mention the fact that Lupus LA I'm just a huge fan of the work that you do with this organization. When I was first diagnosed, I attended some of the Lupus LA support groups for several years, which was just a huge asset and a comfort and source of information and support, and have attended some of the patient conferences as well. So definitely benefited from the services. So I'm so grateful for that.
That's great. And I think the podcast is really an evolution of all of that. And I think that's the fact that you're here now talking to me on the podcast, it really is a full circle type of experience that we're looking for. So, but take me back to your first symptoms, what you were doing at the time, how your life was going, and then how it developed.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I really started having some symptoms maybe way back in high school, but it wasn't until I was kind of early in my teaching career. My career started off in education, and I was an elementary school teacher. When I started getting more and more kind of more debilitating symptoms that were really impacting my day-to-day life. And of course, you know, working with little kids at an elementary school, I was picking up kind of everything from the kids, and with my weak immune system, you know, every cold that I got would turn into a respiratory infection, and I just seemed to be getting one infection after the other. So that's when things started kind of looking like there might be something going on here. And it was actually that year of teaching during that winter, I developed a really bad case of pneumonia that I just had a really difficult time fighting off. So that, in addition to a bunch of different inflammatory issues kind of popping up all over my body, like iritis, inflammation in my eyes, and pleurisy in my lungs, and just kind of lots of different things, and just really, really crushing fatigue. So unfortunately, I had to leave my teaching career because I just couldn't keep up with the work. It's a very physically demanding job, running after the little kids. I loved teaching, and it was a really devastating loss for me because I just finished my master's degree in teaching. And but I knew I had to focus on my health and figure out how to get my symptoms under control, and really just figure out what was going on. So yeah, so I left my
Did you leave your teaching career before or after your official diagnosis came in?
I actually left before my official diagnosis. I went on disability kind of following that case of pneumonia to just kind of search for answers. So I went to doctor after doctor during that period of time, trying to figure out what was going on. My primary care doctor was kind of sending me to lots of different specialists. And it took a little while for them to kind of connect the dots and figure out that this was like a systemic autoimmune disease that was going on. And the rheumatologist that I saw at the time diagnosed me with lupus, and things started to make a little bit more sense, and I was able to finally get some treatment. So yeah, but it took a little while to get the diagnosis. Yeah.
And so take me a little bit into the decision. when you left teaching, did you think I'm going to come back, I'm going to get this figured out, and I'm going to come back to teaching, or was it the kind of thing like, nope, this is life changing. I'm going to make a U-turn here or a hard left.
I really didn't know at the time. All I knew was I felt terrible and I had to get back to some sort of stable health. So I certainly was hoping at the time that I would be able to return to classroom teaching. Um, but, I just kind of spent some time looking for answers. And after the lupus diagnosis, unfortunately, like my health continued to decline, and I was diagnosed with more chronic conditions. I also have POTS, which is a form of dysautonomia, and I have complex regional pain syndrome, a nerve disorder. So then it just became more clear, kind of as my health worsened over that period of time, that unfortunately returning to classroom teaching wasn't really in the cards for me. I did a little bit of one-on-one tutoring with some elementary school students, which was something that I was able to, at least I could do within my physical limits. But yeah, no, it was a tough loss for me. So I really identified with my work, so to lose my teaching career was really to lose a lot of my sense of self. So it was a tough time.
And let me ask the reverse question. How do you think having to lose your teaching career impacted your health?
That is a good question.
If at
It
all,
was, yeah, no, I think it did negatively impact my health, because it just kind of set me into a spiral of, a lot of negative emotions. I definitely went through a period um, of depression and just the unknowns of everything that I was going through was really difficult. And at that point, I was in my, early mid 20s, and the thought of maybe not being able to work again was really overwhelming and daunting. So yeah, just the unpredictability of it all and all the stress, I'm sure negatively impacted my health. So my mindset kind of at the time was like, okay, I just need to find the magic cure, the magic pill, right, to make it all go away, and then I can get back to teaching, get back to living my life. And as we know, there's no magic cure
not
to all
yet,
this.
not yet.
Hopefully in our lifetime, right? But
Right.
for the time being, it's something we have to learn to live with. So it took a long time for me to kind of accept that, and accept that kind of this illness was here to stay, and that I needed to find a way to live well while managing this illness. And that took a little while for me to come around to, but that was kind of like a big turning point for me when I got to that point. So,
And was there something that triggered that turnaround? Was there something that led to you kind of going, okay, now I need to, I know I'm not going back to the teaching career, but I'm going to, explore other interests and try to, pull myself, I guess up. And was that a conscious decision, or was it related to you started to feel better? Was there treatments involved? I know I just asked you 14 questions in one question. But.
yeah, no, I think a lot of it was just some work that I was doing on myself with kind of some mindset work. And I'm a big fan of mindfulness and meditation, and being just more in tune with myself. And like I said, the thought of not being able to work anymore was not something, I didn't want to go down that path. And I knew what I was doing at that point wasn't working. And just kind of keeping my life on hold forever wasn't really a way to live. So I knew that I needed to make some changes. So I knew that I needed to find something that I could do to work from home. So I actually ended up doing a big career change, and I work from home part-time in finance now. So I went back to school online, which was something that I could do from the couch on my laptop. I went through a UCLA extension to study economics and finance, and just did a whole self-study program at home to study for the Series 65 exam and passed that. And now I'm able to, have a new profession that I can do from the comfort of my living room. So, yeah, so I'm on a totally different path now, but I feel good about, having found something that, can still give me a sense of purpose and all of that. And yeah, so who knows if maybe teaching will be in my future at some point, but yeah, I kind of had to take a different path to get things on a better track.
And what I think is also interesting about your story is not only did you choose a different path, but your path really expanded in the sense that, and I'll tell the audience, behind you are all original Emily Suñez paintings. And so we're going to talk about how art made an impact. But,
Yeah.
I think there's a, you're an author. We're going to talk about the book in a little bit too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's interesting to me is that it seems to, at least from the outside, have opened up other areas that may not have been able to explore, had it gone the other way.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, none of us can ever plan for what life is going to throw at us, right? So my life certainly doesn't look like what I imagined it would when I started my career. But there have been a lot of, gifts that having this illness has given me and some silver linings along the way. And definitely this illness leading me to art and to painting has just been an incredible thing. I started painting about 6 years or so ago. And this is during a time when I was dealing with an episode of my CRPS that was really, really tough. And I was in a lot of pain. And so I was just kind of looking for just a distraction from that and just a way to kind of bring more creativity and joy into my life. And so I signed up for a painting class at a studio down the street from me, and I just completely fell in love with it and pretty much haven't stopped painting since. So it's been a really
Did you always have an
wonderful
artistic
thing. Yeah.
talent? I mean, you're an elementary school teacher by a trade, so I assume that comes with a certain level of artistic talent.
There's definitely a lot of creativity involved in teaching. And I think I had also been kind of missing that, aspect. I did a lot of painting in high school, but I really had been away from it since my high school art classes. So it had been a really long time since I had picked up a paintbrush. So it took some getting used to and some learning, but it's just been an incredible therapy for me. I mean, it's very meditative, and it really just helps me feel better in so many different ways. It gives me energy and kind of also the new career kind of gave me a sense of purpose and stuff too. So it's been really wonderful. And I actually paint almost exclusively desert landscapes and plants. And that's because I see a lot of symbolism in those plants in terms of their ability to, survive and thrive in this very harsh environment. So I kind of relate that to the experience of chronic illness and being able to thrive in the face of, all these conditions that I live with. So,
yeah. No, that's beautiful. And your work is great. And maybe we'll try to show some of it along the way here on the visual version of the podcast. But I love what you said about how it's meditative and how you can really, because I do think one of the challenges that a lot of lupus patients face in particular or anybody with a chronic illness is that it's so top of mind all the time. And, I think what you're saying is that it gave you some joy in painting, but it also sort of can take your mind off of, well, how am I feeling now? How am I feeling now? How am I feeling now? Is that accurate?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. With painting, I definitely am in that flow state, where you sort of lose track of time and you just kind of get sucked into it and you're not thinking about anything else. And I think that can be just an incredibly therapeutic thing to have. So I'm a huge advocate for using creativity as kind of like a coping mechanism or a form of therapy for people with chronic illness, whether it's painting or coloring or whatever it is, knitting, or there's so many different ways that you can explore creativity. For me, it happens to be painting, but it's certainly a form of meditation. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to take a quick break. And then on the other side of the break, we're going to talk about your other form of creativity that's coming out in your new book. So we'll be right back after this break.
Please visit our online store at lupusla.org. By purchasing Lupus LA products, you are directly supporting lupus patients and their families. For more information, visit lupusla.org.
And we're back talking to Emily Suñez on the Your Story, Our Fight podcast from Lupus LA. Now, Emily, we're going to talk about your new book, which isn't even out yet. It's coming out February. You tell me the date. February
22nd. February 22nd.
Exactly. It's called The Healing Journal, Guided Prompts and Inspiration for Life with Illness. So tell me, can you hold up a copy? Do you have a copy handy?
I have one right here. Yeah, for those of you watching the video of this. So my book is called The Healing Journal, and it's a guided journal for coping with both the physical symptoms as well as the emotional toll of chronic illness. And I personally am a huge fan of journaling. Journaling has been something that's really helped me kind of process all my experiences related to my illness, and even just to recognize, patterns related to my symptoms in terms of what are triggers and things like that. And I really have enjoyed using guided journals. Guided journaling just means that there's journaling prompts throughout the
Can you go back
journal.
and tell me, because I want to make sure everybody who's listening knows exactly what journaling is. So tell me, for those who haven't done journaling, what is it?
Sure. Journaling is just another word for journal, I guess you could just say, is a diary. So it's just kind of expressing your thoughts on paper. So there's a lot of space in the journal just for exploring your own thoughts and emotions and all of that. So, and then with the guided journaling component, there are specific questions, kind of like prompts that you respond to in writing in the book. So.
Excellent. So basically the idea is you do this every day for 15, 20 minutes, and it just helps you kind of get your thoughts on paper, get your thoughts out of your own head, and put them on paper that you have and can reflect on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very cathartic to just kind of write down your experiences, whether it's related to your illness or otherwise. It's kind of like a safe space where you can write and be honest and express yourself without, any fear of judgment by others. It's just a space for you to, just explore your own thoughts and emotions and all that. So,
So give me an example of a meditation that's in the book that's guided, or not a meditation, a journal that's guided. Give me what are some of the prompts?
So let me think of so each 2-page spread of the book contains a positive affirmation on one side, and then there's journaling prompts on the other side that relate to that positive affirmation. And each of the affirmations and prompts relate to a specific issue that people with chronic illness might deal with. So one of them, for example, might be kind of learning to recognize your body's limitations and kind of certain signs that your body is sending you maybe when you need to slow down and rest. So one of the affirmations is, I listen to my body and trust its limitations, or something along those lines. And then the journaling prompts that go with it might be, what are some of the signs your body shows you when you might need to slow down and rest? Or another one might be, or describe a situation maybe when you kind of overdid it or did too much. How could you have handled that situation better to have stayed within your body's limits? So things like that. So ways that you can help kind of manage symptoms. And then there's other affirmations and prompts that deal with more of the emotional toll of chronic illness, kind of coping with some of the negative emotions and all of that. So, and a lot of the, the prompts and the affirmations in the book really stem from both my own experience and from the experience of me talking with lots of other people who also live with illness, and kind of realizing that there are a lot of these common threads, like similar issues that all of us with chronic illness are dealing with. And I try to tackle a lot of those in the book, like learning to advocate for yourself as a patient, navigating the medical system, which can be very overwhelming, and learning to communicate your needs to those around you, or even in the workplace, things like that. So I tried to kind of compile, what are all the issues that people with illness deal with? They're specific enough to chronic illness, but broad enough to apply to any different type of illness. And so that's kind of like how I derived the prompts and inspiration, or the affirmations in the book.
I really want to know the affirmation for dealing with the medical industry, because I think that one is, I don't know. It's going to need a lot of affirmations for that topic for
One
sure.
of my favorites in the book is I am in charge of decisions about my health. And I think that's a really powerful thing, because we see all these doctors and we get all this information and suggestions of treatments to try and all that. But it's important to remember that, we are our own advocates. We are our own experts on our bodies, and we get to make all the decisions. The buck stops with us, right? We decide what we put into our bodies, what treatments we decide to pursue, and all of that. So,
but I think it does take a while to learn and feel comfortable with that knowledge and that power. I think
absolutely,
too many people do give that power away. And I know you did all the artwork in this book as well, right?
I did. Yes, I did. So it's full of my botanical watercolor paintings, and there's a lot of different healing plants in the book, like everything from aloe vera to echinacea and things like that obviously have some symbolism to tie in with the healing journal. But connecting with nature has been something that I've found to be really therapeutic in dealing with my own illness. But living with lupus, it's sometimes being outside can be difficult with the sun sensitivity and all that. So I also wanted the illustrations to serve as a way to kind of bring the natural world indoors to people that might have difficulty getting outside. And hopefully they serve to just be kind of calming and soothing to the reader.
That's fantastic. I mean, I know we're going to be, we don't have any copies of the book yet because it's not out yet, but Lupus LA is going to be giving some away. So check our social media for that. Tell me, how did writing the book impact, or what did you learn as you went through this process that maybe you didn't know about your own health journey?
It's been interesting. It's been an interesting process, working on this book, to kind of actually put into words a lot of the growth that I've experienced through my illness, and kind of all the lessons that I've learned along the way. And when I hold the book and I see, the whole book full of just inspiration for other people with illness, it does make me realize that how far I've come on this journey. And it's been a really empowering thing for me to do, and through this whole process, and just realizing kind of just my own resilience and how far I've come. So I feel really good about that and proud of the growth that I've made. So the journal is actually something that I'm going to use myself, though. It's like this is a continual work in progress. My illness is still definitely a part of my daily life, and something that I'm still working on learning how to manage and cope with all the time. So it's also, it's something that I've created as a resource for myself too. And that feels great to have that, like I was saying before, I love guided journaling, and part of the reason why I created this journal was because I was searching for a guided journal that related to the experience of chronic illness and disability. And when I couldn't find one, I thought, well, maybe I'll make one myself. So it's been really great to finally see that into fruition. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really thrilled for you, because I think that's great. And I also know that you took action in other ways and started your own nonprofit. We're equal opportunity promoters of nonprofits on this podcast. So tell me a little bit about the Ladn and what that stands for, and how that came together.
Yeah, thank you so much for mentioning that. We're actually not a nonprofit yet. We're hoping to apply for nonprofit status in the future, but yes. So I actually, when I was diagnosed with POTS back in, it was like 2017, 2018, I had never met anybody else with POTS before. So I was really looking to connect with some other patients, because I had benefited so much from the Lupus LA support groups. I knew that talking with other patients could be incredibly valuable. So I ended up forming a POTS support group here in Pasadena, where I live. And that has developed into an organization called Los Angeles Dysautonomia Network, Ladn, which now I co-direct with my dear friend and fellow POTS patient. And we are just an organization that's all run by patients, and we are just trying to find ways to support other people with dysautonomia that live in the Los Angeles area. So we have monthly support group, we do education and wellness events where we bring in guest speakers. We're actually having a workshop this week with a meditation and mindfulness instructor and a yoga instructor. And we do social events and things like that. What we're trying to do really is to try to build community and, provide patients with real connections with other patients to form friendships and support systems. So it's all about community building.
That's super important. I think just tell people, because as I'm thinking about it, we have a lot of lupus patients that listen to us. I'm sure most people know what POTS and dysautonomia might be, but just give me a quick 2-minute lesson on POTS and dysautonomia.
Sure, yeah. So dysautonomia just refers to a dysfunction of the autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system is the system in your body that kind of controls things that your body does in reaction to your environment that you don't really have to think about, like changes in blood pressure and heart rate and sweating and things like that. And POTS is a form of dysautonomia, and it stands for postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. So it's a mouthful, which is why we usually say POTS. But with POTS, basically our bodies kind of have a difficult time fighting gravity. So normally when you go from laying down to standing up, the blood vessels in your legs constrict to send blood upward to your heart and brain. But unfortunately, that doesn't work so well with POTS. So that results in a lack of adequate blood flow to the heart and brain when we're upright, which of course can lead to lots of different issues and dizziness and low blood pressure and all that. So it's been interesting actually to observe over the last couple of years through the pandemic. Actually, a lot of people with long COVID are developing dysautonomia and POTS specifically. So Ladn is providing a lot of support to long COVID patients now who have developed POTS.
Yeah, I think there seems to be a lot of autoimmune connection to COVID and long COVID, and I think that's a big area that's going to be explored over the next few years by rheumatologists and lupus researchers and autoimmune researchers in general. So I don't want to get too specific, but your lupus is sort of, one of many issues, but is that sort of the umbrella issue or do you think, do you sort of have to compete with yourself in terms of what's causing what and what treatment is going to fix what? I think that's an area that we haven't really talked about too much on this podcast, but I know a lot of people with lupus also have other illnesses. And so how do you manage that in terms of balancing out treatments and attention, I guess?
Yeah, it's really difficult. It's tricky when you have lots of different things going on. I mean, I definitely don't think it's a coincidence that I have, multiple conditions. I'm sure they're all related. Unfortunately, we don't fully understand the mechanisms yet. There's a lot of theories that POTS is autoimmune and things like that. So it kind of seems like the root of my illness is some sort of autoimmune process going on. But, it's kind of tricky when I'm in a flare. I kind of have to decipher, okay, like what is the main thing happening here? Is this really like an inflammatory issue, or is this more like my nerve stuff, or is it the blood flow stuff with POTS? And definitely trying to pinpoint, what the root of the flare is determines what the treatment is, right? When I'm in a POTS flare, I usually end up getting like a saline IV or something like that. But when it's more inflammatory, I end up on steroids, more of the lupus stuff. So it's really tricky. And I know most people that I've talked to with chronic illness do have multiple conditions going on. So it can be a frustrating thing too, also to like have all these different specialists that you see. My dream is to like have all my specialists sit down at a conference table and discuss my overall treatment together, because it can be frustrating running around to all these different doctors and trying to connect the dots yourself, But yeah,
That
it's
is a dream
definitely
we
a
all
difficult
have.
thing.
100%. We
Someday,
all have
right?
that dream. Yes. Well, it's getting easier, I do think, with electronic medical records, and, there's at least a trail that every doctor can. And I would always encourage patients to really make sure that your electronic medical record is up to date and that you draw the attention of your specialist to that site so that they can, I think that's one of my biggest pieces of advice to people now versus what it might have been 10 years ago when you're trying to get everybody on the phone. But I agree with you. You always worry that when some doctor tells you one thing that you're really going against something that, against the path. So I think there's a fear there. So we have to wrap up, but tell me, as your book's about to come out, and your impact on the autoimmune world is going to continue to grow, what would you say is your best advice to patients suffering from lupus and multiple other autoimmune issues?
I know it can be extremely overwhelming to have an autoimmune disease, especially at the beginning when you're trying to figure out your diagnosis and how you're going to manage it. And it can make you feel really out of control, like it's not our fault that we develop these illnesses. And certainly there's a certain degree of just feeling powerless about that. But I found it really comforting to kind of focus on the things that I do have control over. And that's kind of what I'm trying to convey in my book, The Healing Journal, as well as, having self-compassion for what we're going through and like learning how to be a really good advocate for ourselves. Developing kind of a strong positive mindset, things like that can be incredibly helpful. And those are all things that, we have the power to do. So I think learning to focus on the things that we do have control over would be where I would start.
Terrific. I think that is a great piece of advice to end on. The Healing Journal is coming out February 22nd. But you can pre-order it now on all the places that one pre-orders books. We're going to wish you the best of luck with it. Lupus LA is going to continue to promote it. Thank you so much for joining us, Emily. This was really an important conversation.
Thank you so much, Adam. And thank you again so much for the work you do with Lupus LA.
On behalf of the entire team at Lupus LA, we thank you for joining the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. Please tune in, spread the word, and come back for more inspiring lupus stories. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz, wishing you good health, and to always remember, your story is our fight.